Good afternoon. Today we will have 3 events. The first event will be the statistical press release of the National Assessment for Educational Progress results from the National Center for Education Statistics. Event 2 will be the remarks from Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos. Event 3 from the National Assessment Governing Board will offer reactions and commentary on the NAEP results. Opportunities for questions from our in-person audience and those watching the live stream will be provided after Dr. Peggy Carr's presentation and the Governing Board's panel discussion. During the Q&A periods, if you're in the room, please raise your hand and we will bring you a microphone. If you're watching the live stream, please type your question in the box labeled Ask a Question at any time, and we will have someone in the room read it for you. Please remember that it's called a Q&A. Don't forget the Q. Please make sure you are asking a question. Lynn Woodworth, the Commissioner of the National Center for Education Statistics, will now begin the first event. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Lynn Woodworth. I'm the Commissioner of the National Center for Education Statistics. I would like to welcome you to the press release for the 2019 National Assessment of Educational Progress, 4th grade, 8th grade reading and math results. The NAEP results you're going to see today are part of a program that has been going on for a couple of decades now. The NAEP results that you're going to see today can be compared all the way back in math to 1990 and in reading to 1992. The results are nationally representative, and also we will have results for states and for some of the trial urban district assessment results. Today, the presentation will be made by Dr. Peggy Carr. Dr. Carr is the Associate Commissioner of Assessment at the National Center of Education. She is the worldwide recognized leading expert in large-scale assessments. Dr. Carr has been with the NAEP program for almost 3 decades, and she and her very qualified and very capable staff who are sitting right behind her are a large part of what makes the NAEP work and how we can keep a good measure on educational progress in the United States. So now, Dr. Carr, if you please come to the podium.
Thank you, Commissioner. A very nice introduction, and good afternoon to everyone. Or good morning for some of you who are joining us on our live streamers today. As Dr. Woodworth said, my name is Peggy Carr. I am the Associate Commissioner for the Assessment Division at NCES, and it is indeed my pleasure to be here today to release the results for the NAEP 2019 Mathematics and Reading in grades 4 and 8. This presentation is in 3 parts. First, I will go through mathematics with national and state results. Next, I'll cover reading for the nation and the states. Then we will pause for a few minutes for questions. Finally, I will cover the district results. After that, you will again have a few minutes to ask questions. So let's begin. The background information that I want to share first is with regard to how we conducted this assessment. Between January and March, we collected data from almost 600,000 4th and 8th graders from 50 states, the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., and the Department of Defense school system. The national score includes the performance of students who attended either public or private schools. The state and district results include only public school students. The results are reported in 2 ways. A scale score using 0 to 500. This scale was developed in the early 1990s for all of the grades. And we also report results by the NAEP achievement levels. The NAEP achievement levels are developed by the National Assessment Governing Board, and they help describe what students should know and be able to do on this scale. They give meaning to the scale. These achievement levels are NAEP Basic, NAEP Proficient, and NAEP Advanced. NAEP Basic represents partial mastery of fundamental skills. NAEP Proficient shows solid mastery over challenging subject matter. And NAEP Advanced represents superior knowledge and skills. Now, the National Assessment Governing Board has set the aspirational goal to be for students to meet or exceed the NAEP proficient level. So let's begin with the results with mathematics. NAEP mathematics measures students' knowledge and skills in number, properties, and operations, measurement, geometry, data analysis, statistics and probability, and algebra. Here we see the trend line of performance for grade 4 mathematics. At the bottom, you see the different years the NAEP data has been collected. And on the y-axis, you see the scale along the side there. An asterisk next to the scale score indicates statistically significant differences from the score in 2019. As the headline says, average scores increased by 1 point from 240 in 2017 to 241 in 2019. This represents also a 27-point gain compared to the first year, 1990. In addition to the national average, we also report results for several subgroups. I'll share those with you as well. Consistent with the overall score gain, several of these groups show improvement. Students identifying as Hispanic, male students, English language learners, and students eligible for the National School Lunch Program. No major subgroup that we typically show or report in this report card showed a decline. The average score only tells part of the story. We also report percentile scores to explain achievement across the performance distribution. The 90th and the 75th percentiles at the top of the slide represent higher ability performers. And the 25th and 10th percentiles at the bottom represent lower performers. When looking at statistically significant changes from 2017, we see improvement for the 25th and the 50th percentiles. Further, for all of the 2019 scores, they are higher than the scores we reported back in 1990. So the NAEP achievement levels offer another way to examine trends for higher and lower performers. As you can see here, the percentage of students below NAEP Basic decreased by 1 point between 2017 and 2019. You'll also see that the percentage for NAEP Advanced increased by 1 point. That is the highest percentage over the entire 30 years, or nearly 30 years, since we started in 2019. We have seen some progress. In fact, you'll see steady progress through the decades, starting with 1% in 1990, 6% in 2009, up to 9% this year. Looking at the percentage of fourth graders who are below basic, there has been a dramatic change. We reported back in 1990 that 50% of the students were in this area of the ability distribution. And today we're reporting that 19% are there. How does progress look at the state level? One might ask for grade 4. We're going to go there next. Most states did not show any change compared to 2017. However, 9 made gains and 3 had score declines. Now, states in this darkest blue are states that improved from 2017 to 2019. States in the lightest blue here had declines, and states with the medium shade blue had no change at all. The table in the upper right side of this slide shows all the states that made changes and the magnitude of that change. As a reminder, the national score increased by 1 point compared to 2017. So next, we're going to look at a grade 8 mathematics. Now, compared to 2017, the average score declined. It decreased by 1 point. No major student group showed an improvement. American Indian, Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian, and male students all showed a significant decline compared to 2017. As we examine the higher and lower performing students, we begin notice there is a change at the bottom of the performance distribution, but in a different direction than grade 4 mathematics. While in grade 4 we saw improvements at the 25th and the 50th percentile, lower performing students show score declines at the 10th and the 25th percentiles. These are changes that we only see here. There are no other changes across any of these other percentiles. However, all percentiles have higher scores compared to the original assessment year of 1990. Looking at 8th grade results for the achievement levels, as you can see, we've made a lot of progress over time. In 1990, nearly half of the students were below NAEP Basic. In 2019, it was down to 31%. As you will notice that we have slipped in recent years as a higher percentage of students in 2019 were below the NAEP, a basic level compared to 2017 and 2009. So, in addition to the national, 6 states, we're going to look at the state results, had a score decline compared to 2017, with 3 showing improvements. Again, these states with declines are in the lightest blue, the states with an increase in the darkest blue. I need to point out that the 3 jurisdictions with increases, the District of Columbia, Louisiana, and Mississippi, scores below the national average. But here we see them making gains. We saw DC and Mississippi also had gains in grade 4 math. So I ask you to keep your eye on their scores as I get to the reading results in just a moment. So that includes mathematics. Now let's transition to the NAEP reading assessment. Like math, I will present the results for grades 4 and 8 nationally and for the states. NAEP measures students' reading comprehension in two types of texts, literary and informational. Grade 4 reading scores declined by 1 point compared to 2017. On the slide, it looks like 2 points, I know, but we calculate the differences using unrounded numbers. The only student group to improve was the English language learners. Their scores increased by 3 points compared to the 2017 scores. Student groups that showed declines were males, whites, blacks, students classified as having a disability, and those eligible for the National School Lunch Program. Examining the distribution of lower and higher performing students, scores are flat for students at the 90th percentile, shown here, and every other percentile has dropped. For the lower performing students at the 10th and the 25th percentiles, we also reported declines from 15 to 17, so this really is a continuing downward pattern that we are seeing here today. Over the entire period of the assessment, it is in fact alarming that we see students in the 10th percentile that are scoring at the same level as students did almost 30 years ago. Looking at the achievement levels, you can see that there is some progress over the long term here. However, the percentage of students has increased in the below NAEP basic range, while the percentage at the NAEP proficient decreased since 2017. This map shows that 17 states declined in grade 4 reading compared to 2017. Only 1 state showed an improvement, Mississippi. Let me remind you that this is the third time that you're seeing Mississippi showing a gain since 2017, since I've been sharing these results. I'll come back to that Mississippi story in just a moment. Finally, we see our grade 8 national trend line as shown here. In 2019, scores have declined by 3 points. Note that, like grade 4, this is based on unrounded numbers, so be mindful of that. The students groups with score decreases include males, females, all racial ethnic groups except for Asian Pacific Islanders, students identified as having a disability, English language learners, and students eligible for the National School Lunch Program. Grade 8 reading was the only subject, I should add this point as well, where students in the Catholic and charter schools showed a decline. The national decline is observed at all performance levels across 2017. You can see that here very clearly in this chart. However, the decline for the lower performing students were greater than the declines at the top of the distribution. So everyone's declining, but the bottom is dropping faster. Like grade 4 reading, our struggling students at the 10th percentile are no better off than they were nearly 30 years ago in 1992. As you may have expected, such a drop will result in movement across the achievement levels, as shown here in this slide. Compared to 2017, the percentage of students below NAEP Basic grew, while the percent of students at NAEP Basic and NAEP Proficient declined. Grade 8 had the greatest number of states that declined of all the grade subject combinations that I've shared with you today. 31 states showed a decline compared to their 2017 scores. Only one jurisdiction increased in grade 8 reading since 2017. That's the District of Columbia. Reminder, DC also improved at grade 4 and grade 8 in mathematics. In addition to the cognitive portion of the assessment, we also asked students and teachers and school personnel to complete a short questionnaire. It provides context for the student achievement data that I'm sharing with you today. One of those questions asked students whether having adequate supplies or instructional materials was a serious problem in their classroom. This slide refers to grade 4 teachers who were surveyed as part of the mathematics assessment. Results show nationally about 6% of the fourth graders had teachers who reported a serious problem with this issue. On this slide, you also see the range across jurisdictions. I find that interesting. It shows 1% in South Dakota, Utah, and Wyoming, to 14% in New Mexico. Now, before I move to questions, I want to summarize these results. I've said a lot. There are several stories to note in these charts. First, between 2017 and 2019, the only increase was in grade 4 math, grade 8 math, and both grades and reading declined. Over the history of the assessment, however, there has been improvement in both grades and subjects. As you can see, the gains have been greater in math than in reading. Math gains have been in the double digits since the 1990s. But another way to look at progress over time is through the lens of decades, which are highlighted here in this chart as well. In 2019, American students' performance is statistically the same in both grades and subjects as 2009. That's an interesting pattern. But let's unpack this pattern, as there is a story behind the no change that we see here. First, look at the growth over time in this chart. The dark blue arrows to the left On the side of each chart, you see that nearly all percentiles improved over the long term. The only exception that you'll see here are the 10th percentiles in grade 4 reading and grade 8 reading. Also note that the gains in mathematics are larger in reading and that they're well in the double digits, not just for the middle of the distribution, the 50th percentile, but for the entire distribution. But looking at the past decade, you see another pattern that I want to point out to you, one where the top is moving up and the bottom is moving down. By that I mean the higher performing students are improving and the lower performing students are dropping. The decline is most pronounced in the 10th percentiles in both grades and reading, and that means our struggling readers are dropping at a faster rate. Although the story in math is slightly better, let us not overlook the fact that students at the 10th percentile have declined or decreased in grade 4 and 8 between 2009 and 2019. In grade 8, the performance of students at the 25th and the 50th percentiles also have slipped since 2009. Here is a summary of the state changes across the assessment. Once again, I want to highlight the progress in Mississippi and District of Columbia. Mississippi was the only state to improve in grade 8 reading, and it also increased at both grade levels in mathematics. In 2019, their scores are the highest in their participation in the NAEP state program. Their scores are no longer below the national average at grade 4 in either subject. They are comparable to the nation. DC was the only jurisdiction to improve in grade 8 reading, where 31 other states declined. And like Mississippi, it had gains in both grades in math. Although DC scores are below, they're still below the national average, they have been making the largest gains in grade 4 reading and grade 8 mathematics over the history of this assessment program in comparison to all states. There's one pattern that may not be as evident in my presentation today that I would like to end with. There are 5 states that declined in 3 of the 4 grade subject combinations between 2017 and 2019. They are Kansas, New Hampshire, Vermont, West Virginia, and Wyoming. This actually continues a pattern for Kansas and Vermont, and that is because both states have decreased in all subject combinations since 2009. So this concludes some highlights from the national and the state section of the NAEP results. We have more interesting findings at thenationsreportcard.gov, and I would encourage you to go there and dig deeper into these very interesting findings. I want to pause at this point, and we're going to entertain questions for about 10 minutes.
I was surprised. Intuitively, I would believe that reading scores would be connected to math scores in some way. So I was surprised to see that math scores increased so much when reading scores didn't. Just because a math problem you still have to read. And so any thoughts about that? I see that that's a trend over time.
Yeah, it's a trend over time that we've been seeing for a long time. I think your question is best asked of the reading specialists who've been fighting over reading wars for quite a while. And I understand now they've returned to their battlefield. And the math specialists, I'm told, for example, that the math curriculum specialists have figured out how to teach math. But you need to ask that of the math specialists. But it's clearly the evidence is there that it's happening. We don't seem to know how to move the scores for reading, but we do for math. But thank you for your question.
Hi, I'm Kara Arundel. I'm a reporter with LRP Publications. I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about the participation rate of students with disabilities and English language learners. I know that's something that has been worked on for a while.
Right. So you might notice that we have a little dotted line in our trend line. That's when we started being more inclusive of students with disabilities and English language learners by offering accommodations and changing sort of the inclusion rules. And we're very proud that we're very inclusive today, a lot more than we were when we started back in the 2000s, the late 1990s to 2000s. The National Assessment Governing Board has passed policy for flagging states that don't meet these criteria. For example, 95%, if a state is not inclusive of at least 95% of their students, we flag them, we sort of call them out. And I'm proud to say that I don't think you're going to see any states being called out in this report. We also have flagging rules for tutors, and Mike Castley might say a little bit about that. I think there's more time is needed to sort of get those inclusion rates where we want them to be, but they're not bad either. You're really, really not going to see a lot of flagging for the tutors as well. But good question. Thank you for the question.
I'm from National School Boards Association, and my question is, the NAEP has already been moved to a digitally based assessment. I would like to know your thoughts about school districts that are facing technology divide, and whether how they can catch up, or whether there is any influence on their performance.
Again, a very good question. We do worry a lot about standardizing our assessments when we go out, which is one of the reasons why we're not using school equipment. The infrastructure in the country cannot support the types of items that we are assessing with students. The devices, the internet connections, they're not always consistent, and they have what might be called important security issues as well. So we do a lot of work ensuring standardization when we bring in our IT equipment. We bring in a closed system with the devices and a server and everything to ensure comparability. There are tutorials that we allow the students to familiarize themselves with. There are tools that are used, and we make those available beforehand. The math tools, for example. So we go through great strides to make sure that we are ensuring standardization across the board. So we're comfortable with reporting these results in that regard.
Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Nellhouse. I'm a consultant with the Assessment Solutions Group, formerly with the Massachusetts Department of Education and the PARC Consortium. I was wondering if you've been able to look into the extent to which shifting demographics might explain some of the results that we're seeing.
Yeah, good question, Jeff. We did look into it, something that we do on a regular basis. On the short term, from 17 to 19, we did a shift analysis for populations and found absolutely nothing. We did do it for the states as well as the districts as well. On the most, it was going to vary a little bit, but for the most part, nothing to worry about. I focused on those sort of stars, such as Mississippi and DC and Detroit, that showed improvement. Again, nothing there for us to worry about. Now, over the long haul, you can be assured that a tripling of Hispanics over the time and a less representation of white students would have some impact on the score. So I do think we need to think about that. But most importantly, we went back to 2009, where we're seeing this bifurcation of the distribution, where things have slowed down with regard to the change in demographic shifts. And I think we're comfortable there too. But a very good question, and I think we do have to be very cautious about interpreting these long trends.
Ann Flynn, I'm a principal with Flynn Strategies at this point. A question, with the shift from No Child Left Behind to the ESSA policies, giving districts more and states more local flexibility in the kind of curriculum that they can pursue, do you sense any impact of that on the change in the scores and the lack of growth?
Well, one of the reasons why we've been happy with these results is that we haven't changed these assessments. I mean, we change things out and make sure that the items that we add back in are comparable statistically, and they're just as valid as the ones that we took out. But we haven't changed these assessments, so we've been holding kind of steady here for a while since these assessments have started. There was some tweaking back in 2005, I think, of the math assessment. The reading assessment has a bit of a tweak, but our technical experts tell us that we're still measuring the same construct as identified in the frameworks. Now, having said that, we're not blind to the need to determine if there is a lack of alignment between what is now happening in the states and what we're continuing to measure. And on the ELA side, there's not a lot of light between what we're measuring and what's going on in the states. And this is through empirical work with our NAEP Validities panel. But they're telling us that we need to look closer on the math side, that there's some misalignment, not much, but there's something there, and we're continuing to assess that. But the National Assessment Governing Board is hearing that, and they're going to be revising their frameworks in 2025, and they're in the midst of doing that now. And I think that they are listening very closely to what these data have to say. Thank you for your question.
I'm Jerry Dances from the University of Maryland. I was wondering how the analysis that you presented would change if you were to separate out the students who are getting free and reduced lunch.
Right.
Would the same state scores, high within the same places score low?
Well, it's a comprehensive question, sir, of course. But I can just tell you from my knowledge of the data, when you bifurcate these data by subgroups, you're sort of seeing the same pattern. So when the distribution is going down, say in 8th grade reading, I mean, it's not because some are going down and some are not. They're all going down. So that would be my answer to your question, but I think the more analytical answer would be to let's sit down and look at the data and see if that holds true for all of it. Thank you for your questions. I think now I should be transitioning to TUTA, and so I'll do that now. In collaboration with NCES, the Council of the Great City Schools, and the Governing Board invites large school districts that meet certain criteria to participate in TUTA, that is our term of endearment. Selection criteria are based on district size, percentage of African American or Hispanic students, and percentages of students eligible for the free and reduced price lunch program. In 2003, we had 10 TUTAs to participate. That list has expanded to 27 districts, as you will see in the results that we are sharing here today in 2019. The performance of TUTAs will be compared in my presentation to the average performance of school districts where there are at least 250,000 people or more, and we refer to them as large cities. This view shows the location of all large cities across the nation. The TUTA districts educate roughly about 50% of the students in large cities nationwide. Let's begin with grade 4 mathematics. Here you see the national public scores, average scores identified by the circles, and the large city average scores identified with the plus signs. The blue bubbles on the bottom are the score differences between the nation and the large cities within that year. So large city school performance improved by 3 points compared to 2017. Students in the large city schools in comparison made greater gains than the nation, narrowing the gap in 2019 to 5 points. Here are the districts with grade 4 math score changes compared to 2017. You can see that 5 improved, indicated here with the dark blue arrows pointing up. 1 decline as indicated by the light blue arrow pointing down. Now Here we see all 27 districts organized by whether their 2019 score is below the large city. I'm going to take a little time to explain this one so that we're together. On the far left, those are the ones that are lower than large cities, the panel on the left. And the one in the middle are those districts that are not significantly different from large cities. And the last panel represents those districts that typically score higher than the large city. Now, within each of those panels, each sections will see the magnitude of district scores, how they changed, or you might see a diamond, and that indicates no change at all. So, Cleveland and Detroit, which are among the lowest scoring districts, they are on the left side here, made significant improvements. Clark County, Denver, and the District of Columbia Public Schools, whose average score is no different from large cities, as I've explained, also showed improvements. The lone decline was Guilford County in North Carolina. None of the districts that showed higher than large cities average had increases between 17 and 19. They would be the one on the far right panel. In grade 8 mathematics, large city schools showed no change while the nation showed a decline. Compared to 2003, the score difference between the nation and the large city schools has dropped from 14 points in 2003 to that 7 points that you see there in 2019. 4 districts had scores gains, and 4 districts had score declines compared to 2017 for grade 8 mathematics. The District of Columbia Public Schools, Denver, Guilford County, and Shelby County all show score increases. The 3 districts with score declines, Dallas, Fort Worth, and Los Angeles, all have average scores lower than the large city. For grade 4 reading, students in large city schools showed no change, while the nation showed a decline. The 8-point gap between large city and the nation is smaller than the 15-point gap 17 years ago. The only 3 districts with measurable changes in grade 4 reading dropped between 2017 and 2019. There's one of these cities in each of our panel, the way that we've laid it out here. Milwaukee, lower than the large city, declined. Jefferson County, there in the middle, not significantly different from the large city, declined. And Miami-Dade, higher than the large city, also declined. Both the large city schools in the nation show declines in grade 8 reading compared to 2017. Remember, that's the one where 31 states declined. Since 2002, large cities have improved while the nation has remained unchanged, resulting in a smaller score difference between the nation and the large city. So what this means is that large city schools have been narrowing the gap. Only one tutor, the District of Columbia, that is DCPS, showed an improvement in grade 8 reading. They were the lone star. Everyone else with a change actually declined. Many of those districts showing changes have average scores in the lower, on that lower panel, and that means that they're lower than the large city average. Now let's see how the achievement level performance look across tutors in large cities. This slide shows the range of percentages at or above NAEP Basic in large cities and the tutor districts. The large number in each box shows the percent at or above NAEP Basic for large city, and then there's the range for tutors underneath. You will note that the majority of the students in large cities are at or above NAEP Basic. The chart also shows that there is a wide range between districts. I'll point out the fourth grade math in the upper right corner as an example for you. In grade 4 mathematics, at the top left, you'll see 74% of students in large cities were at or above the NAEP Basic. The range in the tutor districts was from 38% in Detroit to 87% in Miami-Dade. As I said earlier, so that we can describe and put in context the results for states and the nation, we asked students and teachers and school administrators to complete a background questionnaire or contextual questionnaire. One question we asked of teachers was whether they thought overcrowding was a serious problem in their schools. Shown here, overall, 14% of grade 8 students had teachers who reported overcrowding as a serious problem in their classroom. But there was a wide range amongst the districts. It was as low as 1% of students in Atlanta and as high as 43% in Guilford County, North Carolina. So in closing, I want to share a quick summary of the NAEP results. Here you see the number of districts that had a change between 2017 and 2019 by grade subject combinations. I will note that DCPS was the only district to increase at least in 3 of the 4 grade subject combinations. Those results have the same pattern, you might be asking yourself, as the state section that I've reviewed earlier, but these are actually different data points. District results are for students in public school system only, while the state results also include students in the district's public charter school system. Also worth noting as a sort of a summary statement here is that Charlotte and San Diego were the only districts to report average scores higher than the large city average across all 4 grade subject combinations in 2019. So in closing, I would like to thank all of the students, the teachers, the school personnel, the NAEP staff, the NAEP field staff, and there are like thousands of them, that made this all possible. And then there are the report writers here in the audience today, and my staff, that Dr. Woodworth mentioned earlier, who ensure the quality and the integrity of the data collection and the reports that we're sharing today. Thank you, each and every one of you. I think maybe we have only a couple of minutes, 1 minute, for one question. The lucky person.
Hi, Erica Scully from the Center for Education Reform. What do you see when comparing DCPS versus charters, especially in the demographics? And where is that data? Where could we find it?
Oh, it's there. What I could say about charters in general, but including the charters in DC, is that they're dealing with a different composition of students, minority students, students who are more eligible for free and reduced price lunch, but they're holding their own. That's in general. And for DCPS, I think that the charter schools typically score a little higher. That may not be the case for 2019, I'm not remembering, but in previous years they have scored a tiny bit higher than just regular public schools. Mike Hasley, my colleague here, can say more about that when he arrives on the podium. But I think that it's a testament to charter schools, as far as these data are concerned, that they have a more challenging composition of students, but they are not necessarily declining any more than any other composition of students in the public schools. So thank you for that question. I think that my role here now has ended, and the commissioner will round us out.
Thank you, Dr. Carr. This concludes the statistical press release for the 2019 NAEP 4th grade, 8th grade reading and math results, and also marks the end of the statistical activities today for the National Center for Education Statistics. Thank you.